today was not just a big day for football fans because of the World Cup finals, but it was also a huge day for chess fans because of the Speed Chess Championship finals taking place between Hikaru Nakamura and the current world champion Magnus Carlsen. Now, this event was super hype because Hikaru, who's one of the best blitz players in the world and who's had a fantastic year of chess, becoming world champion in Chess 960 a few months ago, was playing against Magnus Carlsen. And he's Magnus and he's really great at chess. So this was a really fun match, and I typically don't do recaps, but I just thought that the results of this match were so shocking and that the games were just so incredible that I just thought, you know what, I need to show you two of my favorite games that happened, explain to you every single move so that hopefully you can feel for a couple minutes like a super GM. So we have here Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces going d4, Hikaru going knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, and g3. This is now a Catalan, one of Magnus Carlsen's favorite openings, and the opening that he played against me when I played him in a park in Madrid. So bishop e7, bishop g2. The idea is just simply that you're fianchettoing your bishop, and you're basically putting some pressure on this d5 square. You're also maybe preparing at some point to go e4 as white. So castles, and now black captured on c4, which is very normal. Queen c2. Threatening to capture the pawn, and then a6. Black is never going to try to defend this pawn because if they do, I mean, this bishop is going to become really strong. So here white went a4. There's not really any big hurry in capturing this pawn. Well, now b5 definitely is not possible because pawn takes, the rook is hanging. But you always have to be careful if you go b5 because of how strong this bishop can become. So bishop d7, and now queen takes c4. And then bishop c6. The idea is just to put this bishop on this diagonal as well and say, hey, I'm going to go knight d7. I like my bishop over here. So bishop g5, a5. Now this move may look pretty surprising, but one of the ideas of this is that black just doesn't want white to get space by going a5. And black might also at some point want to go knight a6 and go knight b4 and simply place a fantastic piece here on b4. As there's, no pawn that could kick it away as this pawn is already pushed to a4. So knight c3, knight b d7, rook d1 makes sense, developing the rooks, h6, and now, white needs to make a decision. Will they move the bishop or will they capture? This bishop doesn't really have any good square to go to. I mean, if bishop f4, there might just be knight h5 and the bishop has to move. Bishop e3 is just clumsy. Bishop d2 is blocking the rook. Bishop c1, why would you want to go home? And bishop here, then there's g5 and you lose a piece. So bishop takes f6 is the move that makes most sense to get rid of that bad bishop. Knight takes f6 and now knight e5. The knight can now come to the center and, well, a central knight is just fantastic. There's also some pressure being put on this bishop. So black pretty much needs to capture here on g2. And then king takes g2 and c6. So white went e4. The idea of this is that you want to go e4 and then maybe you want to go d5 in some certain conditions. Maybe even, f4, f5 is a little bit crazy, but that's the idea with that. So bishop b4 is just to capture on c3. And this knight is right now defending the pawn. So if white is not careful, this pawn might hang. So that's why queen e2 was played, so that this pawn would be defended. Now, queen b6 was played to get the queen out of the way, and now rook c1. You want to develop all your rooks and have all your pieces doing useful stuff because that is what chess pieces are meant to be for. So rook d8 and then knight f3 defending this pawn. It's going to be really hard to defend this pawn otherwise. Rook d7 and queen c2. So here black captured on c3 and then pawn takes and then c5. Black really wants to immediately threaten the center. So rook b1, it makes a lot of sense putting your rook in an open file. Queen c7 was played and then queen e2. Now rook d8 just to put extra pressure on this d4 pawn, and then rook b5, you can see that these pawns are starting to become maybe a little bit weak. So white is just putting pressure on them. Pawn takes, b6, defending the pawn. And now rook b1, putting some more pressure on this pawn and threatening to take it. Queen b7, idea is that if white takes this pawn, then this pawn is going to be hanging. And while a central pawn is typically worth more than a queen side pawn or a king side pawn, so you don't want to give up this pawn. So white went d5 here. And after e takes d5, white captured on b6, asking, where is your queen going to go? Because there's one place that's good, or a couple places that are good, and there's one place that's bad. And Hikaru actually went to A8, and this is actually a big mistake. The reason for that is, and it makes sense that he went to A8 defending the pawn, and it makes sense that he wants to be in the same diagonal as the opponent's king, but the reason is that now in this position there is E5 threatening the knight. And after something like knight E4, in this position there would be knight D4, and this is actually a fantastic square for the knight. Let me just go ahead and show you if knight D4, what would happen. This is not what happened in the game. Actually, here Magnus blundered, or he didn't do the best move. The idea is that after knight D4, if something like, for instance, knight C3, there's going to be queen G4, and white is actually going to have an insane attack on black's king. I mean, if knight takes B1, then there's going to be knight F5, threatening to checkmate, also threatening to capture on H6. And while this is going to become very messy, but this is a huge advantage for white. So actually white just is going to have a fantastic kingside attack, and the queen is now way too off from the king to be able to defend all of this. So this would have been really good, but actually in this position, instead of going knight D4, which would have been fantastic for Magnus, he went rook A6, threatening the queen and actually putting Hikaru's queen in a better spot. So now the queen went to C8, and now this queen is actually a lot better. It's 1, in an open file, and 2, it's now going to be a lot closer to defend this king, etc. So here rook B6 was played. He didn't want to fall for knight C3, obviously. And now knight C5, rook takes A5. It's a free pawn, but black has a lot of really good piece play. And now D4, this king is still an issue. And here, queen C4, the idea is to threaten this knight. Rook C7, defending the knight. Queen B4, and now knight D3. Now, in this position, Magnus made a huge blunder. And when I say huge, I mean like as big as it gets in a chess game. Like really big. Like, you know how big. I mean, like huge. Queen is right now under attack, but that's not the only threat that there is in this position. In this position, it's crucial that he goes queen D2 and gets the queen close to this king, because actually black is about to checkmate white if they're not careful. And that is exactly what happened. Magnus went queen B5. And here, Hikaru, pretty much on the spot, went knight F4 check. And this is now going to be a forced checkmate. If pawn takes knight, then there's going to be queen G4 check. The king goes somewhere. I don't know where they go. King F1. And well, there's going to be queen takes F3. And this is a mate in 7, but the rook is coming. And, this is just completely lost. And if king H1, well, then there's going to be a checkmate on C1. So, white cannot capture there. So Magnus went king H1. And after queen H3, it's going to be a forced mate in 3. And, well, the mate is either, on G2, or there's going to be rook C1. And, well, it's going to be a checkmate. For instance, one sequence could be G takes F4, rook C1 check, knight G1, queen F3 checkmate. But in this position, after queen H3, Magnus resigned. And I just found it so fascinating that, Hikaru played a fantastic first portion of this match. And in the 5+1 games, he was doing amazing. And he beat Magnus several times. And I just thought that's so fascinating that Magnus, the world champion, could do a blunder like this. But obviously, it's speed chess and anything can happen. And that is the fun of it. That is the fun of speed chess. So let me go ahead now and show you the second game, and this game was even crazier. So in this game, Hikaru has the white pieces and Magnus has the black pieces, and Hikaru went for E4, C5, knight F3, and D6. So this was a Sicilian, and it became a Najdorf, as you guys can see over here. It became a Najdorf, and this is actually known to be a very, very, very aggressive opening that black plays, and I think it's really fun. I actually used to play this in the past, but I think it's a really fun opening. And once again, it's all about who's the fastest one towards the king. You guys will see. So bishop G5, E6, F4, bishop E7, queen F3. So basically, white is putting all of their pieces over here, and they're going to castle queenside, and then they're just going to go for a kingside attack. So queen F3, bishop D7. Black is saying, hey, I'm not going to castle yet because I haven't decided if I'm going to castle this way or if I'm going to castle the other way. If you do too much stuff over here, I might want to escape on that side. So bishop D7, long castles, knight C6, and bishop C4. Now in this position, you can also go E5, and Well, the idea of this is that if pawn takes, there's going to be knight takes c6. And now, I mean, if bishop takes c6, and there, you can go rook takes queen, and it's with check. So you just win material. And if b takes c6, and the pawn structure is just going to be absolutely terrible. So e5 is actually a pretty good move here. But instead, bishop c4 was played, and then h6. Bishop h4, you don't want to capture over here. You want to place this bishop here on f2 and control of these diagonals, which is exactly what Hikaru did. He put this bishop on f2, and now the queen is forced to move, and Magnus went back to c7. Now, bishop b3 was played because the bishop is sort of under attack with the queen on c7. Knight a5, king b1, saying, hey, if you capture over here, I want to capture with the c pawn because I want to open up this file because I think you're going to castle queenside. I think you're going to go that way. And he was right. Magnus castle queenside, f5. The idea of this is just simply that if pawn takes, there's going to be knight takes. And it's just going to be the knight is just going to be absolutely fantastic. The pawns are going to be shattered. So that would be bad. So knight takes b3, c pawn takes b3, and king b8, avoiding catastrophical rook c1 moves. Now, rook c1, the queen pretty much has to move, but as you can probably tell, the queen doesn't have that many squares to go to. Queen a5 was played. But the question is, where does the queen go? And Hikaru asked Magnus that question. He did a fantastic move that not even the engine, when we were looking at the game, saw immediately, which is b4. I just think that this is a really fantastic move, and we can see how the engine first drops and then goes up because it realizes how strong of a move it is. Really strong move. Hikaru had thought about this move for quite a while for being him. And basically, this queen, I mean, he's saying, where are you going to go with the queen? I mean, queen has to capture on b4. It can't go anywhere else. If queen c7, there's going to be knight d5, and, black is losing a lot of material. Queen has to capture on b4. And now after a3, if, for instance, queen a5, then there's going to be knight b3. And if something like queen over here, then there is bishop g3, and the queen is trapped. So, the queen is just getting trapped in that line. So the queen has to go to c4, which is what Magnus did. And then knight d5 was played. And in this position, there was actually perhaps not the best move. Perhaps b3 would have been slightly better because here the queen really is trapped. But I think he just thought that after knight d5 he is winning material, which he is. He's going to be getting a queen for a rook and a bishop. So he is going to be winning material, which he probably thought was just a safe way of beating Magnus. But Magnus Carlsen is the world champion for a reason, and he doesn't resign just like that. The game took a very unexpected turn. So knight d5, pawn takes, and now, like I said, Hikaru is material up. So h3, the idea is just to maybe go g4 and he's a lot of material up. But it's very easy in positions like this to just say, I'm completely winning. I don't need to do anything. I'll just win. But rook e1 is just bringing all these pieces, and then knight e2. He was just trying to regroup his pieces. Bishop d4. But the thing is that the bishop pair that what black has is actually pretty good. Bishop pairs can become very strong. So queen f4, I mean, he's just going to be winning a pawn. Rook e5, he captured on h6. Captures. And now, without black having the bishop pair, I mean, it feels like it should be winning for white. King a1. And then rook c5, queen takes f6. I mean, pretty much all pawns are falling now for black. Rook d5, it ain't over until it's over. Queen takes f7. It really looks like, there's a lot of stuff going on here. For instance, if bishop takes, then white would just simply exchange. And black does not want to exchange the rooks because it's only with these two rooks that black can try to create some crazy counterplay. Without the rooks, it's impossible. I mean, black needs to not exchange any more piece because if they do, it's just going to be completely winning. And look at all these white pawns. They're just going to promote. They're super strong. So king a7 and now f6. And in this position, there's a beautiful move that Magnus missed that not only saves the game, but wins the game, which is bishop g6. And I think that this is beautiful. The idea is that the queen is under attack right now. You need to move the queen, but, if queen takes bishop, there's going to be rook takes e1, and after king b2, there is rook d2 check, and the king cannot escape. So you have to go queen c2 when you're just losing in this position. You're a rook down. it's completely lost. And, you know, the rook will stop the promotion of this. So actually, there was this beautiful bishop g6 move, and this is completely lost for black because you cannot both save the rook and the queen. So the best move in this position would be to go rook takes rook, but after rook d1 check, king b2, and bishop takes f7, white is going to be a piece down, and because the rooks are still on the table, it's enough. The rook is going to be able to win the pawns. If the rooks were gone, this would actually probably be winning for white because these pawns are going to be so strong. I'm not entirely sure, but white would have a lot more winning chances, or at least drawing chances. But with the rook still being on the table, it's a completely different story. But instead, in this position, after f6, which was a big blunder by Hikaru, Magnus played rook d2. Now, in this position, queen c7 was played. This is fine. Queen takes c4 perhaps would have been slightly better, but it's fine. Rook b5, and in this position, there's only one move that wins. Only one. Every single other one draws. Every single other one. And I think that is really fascinating. Really pretty. You can try to find it, but it's going to be really hard because not even Hikaru found it. This position, Hikaru simply took the bishop and it became a draw by repetition. There's nothing that white can do. But the only move that was winning in this position was to go queen e7. What is the idea? Well, the idea is that now there is, no rook d1 or anything like that. And if something like rook b2, then there is queen takes e4, and now after, the checks, there's not going to be any sort of repetition because after rook c2, which would be, the way of continuing a repetition, the queen can capture and white would end up being a rook up, and this would be completely winning. So I think that it's fascinating that Hikaru was, so much material up, still became a draw, but I just think that shows how many turns speed chess can take, and I just think it's super cool. This was an insane match, and it was hype all the way through. Actually, Magnus ended up doing a big comeback in the 3+1 and 1+1 time controls, and the match score ended up being 14.5 versus 13.5. Hikaru winning. So Hikaru got the 14.5 points, but it became very close. Only 1 point in between. So that was really crazy. It was a really fun match, and I hope that you guys enjoyed watching these two games. I thought there were some of the best games, but there were so many more that I'm sure you can find. All of these games were super fun to see. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like if you did, and I'll see you all in the next one.